Across every industry, a powerful shift is underway. The race to end waste as we know it and promote sustainable practices. Farming and construction, two of the world's most essential sectors, are pioneering a new way forward, one rooted in sustainability, innovation, and circularity. The future depends on how the UK can redefine waste, not as a byproduct, but instead as a valuable resource. In today's programme, Executive TV will explore the state of different industries in the UK, their journey to a sustainable future, and some of the challenges along the way. Unite Group is an ecosystem of businesses, including Unite Knowledge, Unite Solutions, and Unite Hemp, each focused on providing practical solutions to reduce environmental impact.
Unite was formed in 2019, and the reason we formed the group of businesses was to really accelerate decarbonisation of the built environment. The Unite Group's role in decarbonisation of the built environment is really multifaceted. We look at the actual delivery, we support a supply chain to come in and undertake the works as well through Unite Energy and our business model there. We also allow people to upskill or come into the sector through the training and the academy side of things. And then we also look at the circularity of the projects with Unite Waste as well. So we've got multiple ways that we can support decarbonisation of the built environment, and then our longer term goal is to incorporate bio-based construction materials into these retrofit projects as well. We're very much driven by positive impact on people, planet and progress. That's really what our ethos is, and we live by that ethos within the group. It's very much focused on social impact as well as economic impact as well as decarbonisation impact. Those are our three sort of core drivers. Why people would choose our services is really around the multidisciplinary offering that we have within the Unite Group. We're quite diverse, so we can offer a turnkey solution to local authorities, housing association and government as well.
Rowan Foods and Biomass Engineering is a family-run engineering company which manufactures and supplies high-quality, affordable depacking machines around the world.
So my dad started the company in 2008, initially as just an engineering consultancy business. I then joined the business in 2013, which coincided with the rise of the biomass industry really. And then there was a big need for a depackaging machine, and hence the Dominator was born. We gave it a bit of an identity and a website, and it sort of grew arms and legs from that really, and we started shipping them off all around the world.
One of the things we're actively involved in and pushing forward is for the smaller food companies who've got a small factory, not the big warehouses, probably low output of waste food. So we make smaller machines and depackage on site.
Cefetra Ltd, part of the wider Cefetra Group, supplies agricultural raw materials for the feed, food and fuel industry across Europe. Cefetra Ecosystem Services is a programme offered by Cefetra to support farmers in the UK transitioning towards regenerative and sustainable practices.
So Ecosystem Services is our response to our role in our business. Our business is involved in agriculture. Agriculture is 25% of world CO2 emissions. So when you start thinking about reducing emissions and industries that want to reduce their emissions, or on the farming side, want to be more responsible about their emissions, we have a giant role to play in this picture of reducing emissions. And we accepted that we can fulfill our role as a service provider to farmers and industry in this respect as well, help both these ends of the supply chain reduce their emissions. So we set out to think about how can we do that? At which point of our activities can we do that? Can we do that with shipping? Can we do that on the trucking side? Can we do that with barges that we do on inland waterways? And we came to the conclusion that the most logical place for us is to do this with regenerative farming, to help farmers on their farms reduce emissions in a way that is marketable, in a way so that they get rewarded by the market for what they do.
BioMar, a customer of Cefetra and a supporter of their ecosystem services, is a global leader in sustainable aquaculture, providing feed solutions across more than 90 markets and tailored for over 45 species.
Sustainability and climate change have obviously been part of the national and international discourse for many years. But for us, they're not just a buzzword or a trend. It's actually core to our today's actions and also part of our strategy for the future. We are aware that 80% of the carbon footprint of any farm, fish or shrimp, is actually associated to the feed. And the raw materials that go into the feed make 97% of the emissions associated to the feed itself. This is why we, as a feed company, we have a responsibility to really change the way that we source our materials and look for more sustainable options and really push the entire supply chain towards more innovative solutions. And that would include materials like circular materials, regenerative materials, and restorative materials. So another challenge to sustainability for us is scale. So to be able to reach the scale that is needed to the industry, we often have to invest in solutions that might not be cost effective right away. But we are working with our suppliers like Cefetra and their Ecosystem Services program to be able to invest on regenerative farming. And we are trying to bring everyone on this journey with us, whether it's our suppliers or our customers or their customers, the retailers, all the way to the end consumer. We're really influencing the entire supply chain. This is the only way that we can really guarantee the longevity of the industry and to support the growth that the industry is expecting in the future.
The demand for growth in farming and construction has historically come at a cost to the environment. Today, industry leaders are showing that sustainability and growth can coexist through smarter practices. Protecting ecosystems is no longer a side effort. Conservation efforts are helping industries secure natural resources while also ensuring circularity.
Currently, the construction sector in the UK emits around 40% of our overall carbon emissions, and it's a massive industry that's going to need a lot of support to be able to adjust and go to alternate materials. So I think there's a desire to be more sustainable within the sector. There's a lot of discussions around how we can do that as a sector and support each other doing that. But I think also there's a long way to go really towards achieving the net zero target, specifically in the built environment.
Well, certainly from our point of view, we've seen a big growth in the last 12 months, certainly in the UK sector, of new biogas plants being built and planning permission going in for new ones going forward as well. So certainly the last 12 months, after a period of maybe a couple of years of sort of stagnation, yeah, there's a lot of growth.
Using carbon negative construction materials really helps the construction industry as a whole because it reduces the embodied carbon of those developments of those new build or retrofit projects. If we use bio-based materials, then we'll take in the carbon that's photosynthesized by the plants from the atmosphere. They release oxygen, which is obviously a good thing for as humans, we breathe oxygen, and then that biomass is used to make different construction insulation materials, which locks up that biogenic carbon that's been sequestered by the plants long term into the built environment. So it really allows us to accelerate the removal of carbon from the atmosphere and lock that carbon up into buildings. There's a lag in the adoption of the materials, I think probably driven by some delays in legislation. There's Part Z around planning that looks at whole life carbon of developments and buildings, which hasn't been fully implemented yet. We've got a future home standard that unfortunately didn't really go far enough as far as embodied carbon. But I think there are some leaders in the sector that are really trying to drive that message forwards that we need to focus more on whole life carbon assessments of buildings and embodied carbon, not just operational carbon that's been the primary focus in the more recent years. The retrofit industry in the UK is, I see it's quite collaborative. There's various different bodies like National Retrofit Hub, the UK Green Building Council that are really trying to collaborate with industry partners and drive forwards the The retrofit solutions and delivery, ultimately, it needs accelerating. There's still circa 27 million residential properties in the UK that need retrofitting to achieve the net zero targets that have been legislated for 2050. So we really need to accelerate. That means bringing more people into the sector, potentially more grant funding or green finance solutions for the able to pay, the willing to pay market in the sector as well. So renewable energy is a great solution when we look at how we decarbonise. We're trying to decarbonise our grid, and ultimately that means moving away from oil and gas and coal. We've been pretty successful at moving away from coal. We now need to move ourselves away from oil and gas. To do that, we need to bring more renewables online, whether that be solar, whether that be wind, whether that be tidal, but we also need energy storage capacity for that renewable power, because we'll need to store that so we can use it when it's needed most across the grid.
Microplastic pollution highlights the urgent need for a true circular economy. By designing products with end-of-life recovery in mind, industries are beginning to tackle invisible waste at its source. A circular economy is essential for preserving natural ecosystems, conserving finite resources, and even protecting human health.
Microplastics is where you take the packaging off the food, and in the process of taking the plastic away, separating the system, you end up with minute bits of plastic that you can't even see with the human eye. And that follows through the whole process, and it ends up in the digestate, which is the food when the bugs have finished getting any goodness they can out of it, that then is passed to the farmer, which gets spread onto the fields as a fertiliser to help the crops and the grass grow, but also gets into the water stream. So then this microplastic follows all the way through back to us when we drink or when we eat. So that it's a massive problem, and the human body can't cope with all these little bits of plastic, and it's causing issues that the government knows about. Lots of people know about it, but we're not tackling it. We're just kicking the ball down the road. We know it's a problem. So our machine has been proved to be 99.93. The soot that comes off our machine, because it's a slow speed, with the innovations we've got inside that machine, we know it's 99.93% clear of any plastics, which is well in front of the hammer mill high-speed designs, which got lots of big problems with microplastics. And in fact, Germany and some of the other continental countries are bringing in legislation to stop the amount of microplastics being spread with the digestates onto the land, into the watercourse, into animals, which is really bad. Yeah, the circular economy is what it says. It's a circle, and it's not broken by chuck this bit in the ground. We have to use everything. We've got limited resources on this planet. We can't afford to throw them away. It's economically the right thing to do, and it's the right thing to do as a human being.
The growing waste crisis threatens public health, depletes natural resources, and accelerates environmental degradation. Challenges in current infrastructure and governmental policy remain massive barriers to tackling the problem.
Old thinking was, we don't need that, we're chucking it in the ground, because we don't know how to unpack it. Most people probably don't even realise that all this packaging that the supermarkets give us every day, we don't need it, but we get it given to us with the food. So when we throw food away that we don't want, or it doesn't meet the standards, we must take the packaging off, because we can't get at the food we want to make gas or animal food. So we have to separate it properly. The challenges are, there's multiple challenges as there is with any job, but the government and the council are providing money in the terms of vehicles and people to collect the food, waste food, or a food that's not fit for human consumption, and taking it from the doorsteps, from the cafes and that. They're collecting it, but then they almost forget it's not finished, the job's finished. You've got a big heap of waste food and stuff we can use again. So what we're going to do with it, lads? And it doesn't, there's no thinking. So it has to be taken on by the private sector or bigger companies to actually use that resource, as we said, back into anaerobic digestion to make gas and flow through that way. But the legislation says you can't dump it, but it doesn't really say what you can do with it. Well, what we're doing is we're giving people solutions and machines that can reuse what was a waste product and turn it into something that can be reused and keep the things going round the circular. And so rather than dropping outside the circle, it stays in and we can reuse it.
Healthy soil and thriving biodiversity are the backbone of resilient agricultural systems. Regenerative farming is helping restore ecosystems while maintaining productivity, and Cefetra's ecosystem services is putting it into practice on UK farms.
Regenerative farming. When we talk about regenerative farming, we are really talking about a set of practices that have a focus on outcomes for soil health and carbon reductions or removals. So the focus on soil health is the regenerative part. It's basically the aim of the interventions is to improve continuously soil health. It becomes better. It's not just sustainable, i.e. you can just keep doing what you're doing. It's better. That's in very simple terms the target of regenerative farming. And at that point, it's really just what a farmer does anyway. There's no farmer that wakes up in the morning thinking, well, I'll do things to make my farm worse. Of course, that's the normal course of practice. We call it just good practice. It's what a normal business person does. They use what they have and what the market wants in the most optimal way. And regenerative farming is exactly that, with the added element that now the farmer gets rewarded for other things on top of just having a very high yield. That is traditionally, since World War II, that's been the case. Farming has been about high yields, about using chemical fertilizers, and everything's been tuned to that. So there's been a shift of focus where the market says, well, we, all of us as consumers, have to take responsibility for the impact that our demands have on the environment. And for food, that is what happens on the farm. And if we want that impact to be less, i.e. less erosive to soils, less damaging to water, less damaging to biodiversity, then the practices that are part of our program, they deal with that. They reduce these impacts and enable the farmer to produce what the market wants. And our advice, our inputs, provides the means. So that the means are matched to the market demands and everything's optimized and the farmer applies just good practice.
In our industry, data is a really critical thing. So we actually have a part of our business called Ceres Analytics, and that's a team of people, real heavy-duty data engineers, data analysts, and they are scouring the whole market. Because in the world of commodities, we call it the S&D, but the supply and demand. That's a critical thing, because when you're trading commodities and you're trying to help customers to hedge out of that volatility in the market, the data is really important, because is the crop really big in the UK? Yes. Say, for example, yes. Does that matter in the grand scheme of things? Because actually there's a drought in America. And if there's a drought in America, it doesn't matter whether there's a big crop in the UK, because fundamentally the world balance of commodities is in deficit because a large growing region has had a poor crop. So analysing the supply and demand is critical. But this team in Ceres, they go back further than that. So they go back and look at how many hectares were planted. What's the weather pattern like? What's the predicted weather pattern like? What's happening in geopolitics? You know, you look at countries where there's been administration changes, and the policies that they implement, that can change the whole world of commodities, because one country may not be willing to import from another country, so the whole dynamic of the supply and demand changes. So analysing and scouring the world of geopolitics the weather patterns, what's been planted, has there been crop failures somewhere, has there been a pest outbreak. They're analysing all of that data every single day, and they're reporting that back to our traders so that our traders can advise our consumers about what's happening in the world and help them to make good decisions about purchases. And then our traders are then looking at those purchases our consumers have made and then trying to hedge that, because things are changing all the time. And it's very difficult to hedge something if you don't have data. So the data is absolutely critical in our business.
I mean, it's the oldest industry on the planet, isn't it, farming? It's always evolving, it's always changing. Science will always come to the rescue for anything, I believe. We are seeing climate changes. We've monitored the rainfall here. Well, grandfather was monitoring it, fathers monitored it just by daily rainfall records. And certainly since 2000, we've seen a huge jump in our annual rainfall. So we are seeing huge changes. But there's nothing we can do about the weather. We've got to adapt with it, we have to change with it, and we have to gear ourselves up that when we do get a window, that we're in a position to be able to go and get the crops in the ground, or get the chemical on the ground or on the crop, and fertiliser spread. Various farms have got different challenges. We have animals on the farm, and I know that's all part of regenerative farming. We can't really go direct drilling, which would be a very, very good way of reducing a lot and helping out on the environment, but we have to work our organic manures into the soil. How can we change? Well, we can become more efficient. Maybe there'll be a different fertilizer coming along that we could use. Yeah, there'll be changes. Like I say, science generally comes along to help out, but it's up to us to adopt to it. But it's all boils down to cost.
Hempcrete as a product has multiple benefits. If we look at it from when it's cultivated in the field, we don't use any pesticides or insecticides. Quite often, very little fertiliser is needed on most soils too. So that means we reduce runoff into rivers and streams, so we improve water quality, and hemp will actually suck up any residual pesticides and insecticides that have been left in the soil, so it will clean those soils as well. It grows up to 4 metres tall in the UK in just 4 months, so it sequesters huge amounts of carbon, around 16 tonnes per hectare into the biomass is sequestered, and then you're also sequestering carbon into the soil. Because the crop grows so tall, you have a large amount of biomass in the soil, the roots ultimately to hold the crop up. That means you leave that biomass in the soil, which is breaking up the compaction, it improves aeration, and it also, because it's a deep taproot, it brings up lots of micro and macronutrients and allows the following crops to access those nutrients, which means from our research you get a 16 to 18% increase in the following winter wheat or spring barley crops when they follow hemp in a rotation. And then it's great for biodiversity as well, because we don't use pesticides or insecticides. It hums with insect life in a hemp field, and it's one of the last flowering crops that we have in an arable crop rotation. So it gives a late season source of pollen to our bees and pollinators as well in the fields. So lots of benefits to biodiversity and also the water quality, and then the improved soil function in the microbiome as well. But then when we look at the benefits of the materials and how they're used, hempcrete as a material, it's 100% natural, it's bound up with a lime and mineral binder. So that means we don't get any off-gassing of semi-volatile organic compounds, SVOCs or VOCs, which you often get from petrochemical alternative materials. So it improves indoor air quality, but it also regulates humidity really well because it's a breathable material. So it can absorb quite a bit of moisture out of the atmosphere, it can retain that moisture and then slowly release that moisture back into the atmosphere. So controls humidity really, really well. And that breathability also means that you don't get moisture build-up, which you see with other closed cell insulations. And when you get moisture build-up, you then get black mould. When you get black mould, you get respiratory illnesses. So it's really good from a human health perspective as well, improving the air quality. And the big win is it's carbon negative. So you're taking all that biogenic carbon, locking that up into the built environment long term. So you get long-term carbon storage. And there's science that shows that hempcrete is above 100-year permanence of carbon lockup. So that means that you can actually achieve carbon credit potentially as well to inset or to offset, because of carbon removal potential from the materials. So you get lots of benefits for the residents, you get lots of benefits to the environment, and we're removing carbon and locking carbon up into the buildings. Some of the other different products we use hemp fibre for, non-woven insulation is one example, which can be an alternative to rock wool or glass wool. There's also biocomposites where we use the fibres, there's textiles as well, there's multiple different applications that can use the fibre, but if we're focused on the built environment, it's really acoustic and lightweight insulation materials that you'd utilise the fibres for. Education is a key piece around engaging clients and utilising the different hemp-based materials. Often they're not aware of the performance benefits, they're not aware of the carbon or the biodiversity benefits. So we have to start really around education, and so people can understand how these different materials can be incorporated into new build and retrofits. Once they understand how they can be incorporated, and then they also understand the ecological impact and the benefits of the ecological impact of hemp-based materials and also the carbon benefits, then quite often they'll be far more engaged about utilising the materials in projects.
The UK government plays a pivotal role by setting regulatory frameworks and offering incentives for sustainable practices. In the UK, stronger action is needed to enforce circular economy principles and minimising waste. Public awareness is essential to achieving real change. Without this, the waste crisis will continue having massive implications on the environment.
What the government needs to do is to give more support for once the food's collected, what should be done with it, and not just leave it up in the air. It should be done, and it should be done in the right way that we can use everything, but including the plastics that are removed. At the minute, the plastics, everyone says recycle, 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 but there's very little outputs that will accept these multiple plastics that come off the food. We can incinerate them, and that's not maybe the right answer because we wasted a lot of energy again. So we need more help and support to use everything.
The farming and construction industries are critical to the UK's environmental future, and both are beginning to embrace circular economy principles to address waste and resource challenges. While progress has been made through innovation and policy changes, significant work remains to scale these solutions nationally. Success will depend on continued investment, stronger regulation, and widespread industry collaboration to ensure that sustainability becomes a core part of operational models across sectors.